How we doing this afternoon? It's Joe Santmeyer. This is the Shady Tree Joe channel, and after doing videos now for a little over a year for YouTube about Ethyl and whatnot, I come to realize that we've never had a proper introduction for Ethyl. So we're going to do that today. I'm going to go ahead and go through the details of what's been done. I know there's going to be some folks out there that aren't going to appreciate it. The haters are going to be upset because, well, she's not pure. And hence Ethyl, the shameless hussy. So, yeah, nothing pure about her. She's a working girl, but she's mine. If you don't like what I've done, that's fine. That's your prerogative. Build what you want. I built what I wanted, and I'm happy with what I've got going on so far. There's still a lot more to go, but let's get on with the proper introduction. Okay, for starters, Ethyl is a 1957 Chevrolet 3200. 3200 being the 97-inch long bed box. When I went ahead and built her, I decided that I didn't want a short bed. I was going to go ahead and keep it somewhat stock, or at least stock appearing. I rescued Ethyl from a metal scrap yard in Phoenix, Arizona 25 years ago. Somebody had gone ahead and brought in the rolling shell and sold her for scrap metal. At the time, steel was going for $68 a ton. And fortunately, the operator of the yard had enough sense about him to ask the person selling the truck to sign over the title. And with that, he got the truck with the title, probably paid scrap steel prices for her. And then I came along, I don't know how many weeks later. The truck was sitting out in front of the yard, and I was dropping off scrap steel, and I asked, well, how much you want for it? I was told $1,500. Guy, I'll be right back with cash and a dolly. And so I dragged her home. No engine, no transmission, no interior, but she was a two-wheel drive rolling shell. Okay, Ethyl was the truck that I wanted when I was in high school. I always wanted the Chevrolet Task Force Series truck. I thought they really looked neat. I liked the look of the bed. I liked the shape of the fenders and the grille. 1957 was a one-year only grill, and that was by far my favorite. I've just got a quirk for the unique, I guess, or the unusual. When I bought her, like I said, she was a rolling shell. Had some wild dreams like a young man gets. I was going to go ahead and hot rod her as a two-wheel drive. Thought about putting a big block in her. In fact, I was actually setting up to go ahead and put in a big block. I'd already done a big block swap on Kim's C10. She was really happy with it. Olive was really happy with it, and I thought that was how it was going to go. Of course, at this point, Catherine was on her way, and shortly thereafter, fuel prices started going through the roof, and big block power really didn't seem like a good idea. I'd also toyed with the idea of 426 Hemi. Chrysler had re-released the Street Hemi for a while, and I fortunately didn't have 10 grand to go ahead and put in it, but I thought that would have been really unique. I mean, a Chrysler Hemi and a 57 Chevy truck, who'd have thunk it? Well, there's a guy that did it with 55 Bel Air, but that's another story and another guy. As it worked out, the 350 small block that had been in my wife's C10, which had been her grandfather's truck, had dropped the valve seat. And so I went through, I rebuilt that motor. Went ahead and built it up and was going to put it in Ethyl. In fact, I did put it in Ethyl. Ethyl ran with that 60 over 350. It had already been rebuilt once before, but she ran with that 60 over 350 for a while. Drove her around a little bit, and I've done a lot of work. I went ahead and spent a lot of money trying to keep her stock looking, but a hot rod. I didn't lower her. And I went ahead and said, well, you know what? She really needs disc brakes. She really needs power steering. And, well, the disc brakes were nice to stop. The power steering made the original steering on this truck an absolute nightmare. She had the worst bump steer I've ever encountered. For those of you who don't know what bump steer is, Basically, you hit a bump in the road and the vehicle starts to change direction. In Ethyl's case, she would almost change lanes. In fact, she would be halfway out of her lane after hitting a bump in the road. It wasn't safe. I wasn't happy. And it was really kind of spooky, kind of scary, and I was disappointed because this was the truck I'd always wanted, but it was the truck that I just couldn't stand to drive, and I was kind of crushed. Give or take some years, and again, the disappointment had settled in on me, and I decided that as much as I loved the look of the truck, I didn't like the way it drove. I didn't like the way it rode. It was horrible. Being inside that empty cab, at that point I'd found a bench seat for her, but the interior of the cab was still an empty shell, and driving down the road it sounded like you're inside of a 55-gallon drum rolling down a gravel highway. It was horrible. And so I was looking at what the other guys were doing. There was lots of other stuff going on. Guys were doing Plymouth Volare IFS swaps. Dodge Dakota was another popular swap, and of course the GM F body and G body were frame swaps or subframe swaps that folks were doing. And okay, you know, that if it works, and IFS is a nice upgrade from the solid front axle. You got power disc brakes, you got power steering all built in. And you know, the ride wasn't nearly as harsh, but there was a trade-off. Actually, there's two trade-offs. One, Ethyl became a lowrider. I wanted a truck that looked like a truck. I never wanted a lowrider. And at one point, I went ahead, had P235, God, what were they? 235 60R15s on her, and those look kind of sharp, especially when the suspension was uncut. But then after I went ahead and cut the frame and put the Camaro subframe in the front bumper was about 3 inches off the ground, maybe 4, and I didn't like it. And not to mention, she started to look like every other truck out there, and that was something I really didn't want either. Ethyl, I wanted to be unique. I didn't want to do something that everybody else was doing. When I resigned myself to the small block, I started looking into alternatives, anything to go ahead and change away from the basics that everybody else was doing. Everybody at that point was doing the tune port injection. Tune port injection was a big upgrade. And I started thinking, well, hey, I can go ahead and get my hands maybe on a cross ram intake manifold, put twin carburetors on it, on cross ram. They used them on the first Z28 302 Camaros, and it was a hot little motor. Of course, it wasn't a truck motor. It was designed to be revved out. It really wasn't very streetable, so that wasn't the best option either. So I started looking at other ideas. And when I started looking at other ideas, I thought, well, hey, you know, there was that 83 Z28 Camaro, and some of the Corvettes in that same era had a Crossfire fuel injection. It has twin throttle bodies, very similar to the cross ram intake manifold that they used to go ahead and race back in the day. But it had a removable top plate, and it was fuel injection. It was EFI. And well, hey, there weren't many of those around. It wasn't very popular. I could go that route. That would be something unique. You open the hood, you don't see tune port injection, you don't see a carburetor, you see twin throttle bodies. And so I did that, and I got it running. And I found somebody to go ahead and rewrite the EEPROM for it. Or they went ahead, I bought a custom PROM to make it run and drive. And I did. I ran it and I drove it for a little while. But being out here in Oklahoma, you know, even though the truck was kind of a low rider, I wasn't too upset with it yet. The ride was a lot better. But being out here in Oklahoma, I parked her for the winter. Being Shade Tree Joe, I don't have a shop to work out of yet. I'm still in the process of building mine. And that being the case, Ethyl got parked out here in the, not really the pasture, but in the front yard. And by the next spring, I had rodent damage to my wire harness. And so I had to repair that. And in the process of repairing that, after sitting, the issues that plague the crossfire fuel injection started to rear their ugly head. Idle air control motors started going bad. They're hard to find, they're expensive. And crossfire fuel injection just really wasn't that nifty, that reliable. If I'd got it dialed in, maybe I could have gone ahead and stuck that out. But I had other plans. And so I pulled off the crossfire fuel injection manifold. I put on a basic 2-barrel TBI manifold. Used the same computer, just a different PROM. So that was a pretty simple swap. It was the same wire harness. I just had to go ahead and remove the adapter for the second throttle body. So that was no big deal. And I'd repaired the road damage, and I had it driving. But she was a lowrider, and I never wanted a lowrider. Okay, some of you guys might be familiar with this, some maybe not so much. Back in the mid-50s, GM kind of partnered up with North American Auto Parts Company out of, I think it was Wisconsin or Minnesota, I can't remember which, it's been a while. But NAPCO did a four-wheel drive conversion for General Motors. You'd go ahead and order your truck at the factory or through the dealership, and if you wanted four-wheel drive, they sent the truck off to NAPCO. NAPCO removed the front axle, removed the rear axle, mounted their own re-geared axles, mounted a divorce mount transfer case, and changed the transmission cover, and installed the extra shifter needed for four-wheel drive, and a couple of nameplates, a plaque on the dashboard to let you know which or how to use the transfer case, because again, four-wheel drive was new, and they started building four-wheel drives. These NAPCOs were somewhat geared to the moon. They climbed straight up a rock wall, but you weren't going to go anywhere fast. That's just the way they were designed to work. It was a work truck. When I was in high school, I had a classmate that she drove a 1958 NAPCO as her daily driver to school. It was a 3800 series with a flatbed on the back, and being a NAPCO, she drove that thing from Cave Creek, Arizona to Scottsdale every day down Scottsdale Road, topped out 45 miles an hour with that engine just singing a song. And she had a line of cars behind her because it was a 55 mile an hour zone. Nobody could hardly get around her. There wasn't many places to pass. But it was a cool old truck, and it's set up just like this. It was a beast of a truck. It was what a truck should be, at least in my opinion. So that got me to thinking, well, hey, you know, Ethyl could be like a NAPCO. I didn't want to, I'm not going to go ahead and call her a NAPCO, because that's not fair to those that have gone out to collect NAPCOs, rebuild NAPCOs. Yeah, it wasn't done at the factory, but it was done with the factory's approval. Chevrolet, GMC, I know Ford had some that were done. I think there's Studebaker. And they didn't do just the half-ton trucks. They did commercial trucks too. Marmon Harrington did some conversions also. There were several that did it. And I think there's still maybe a few that are still doing it. But the kicker of this is that I wanted her to look like a NAPCO, but I didn't want that ride. I wanted something that was comfortable to drive, something I could enjoy driving. So some years went by, frustration over the two-wheel drive lowrider had kind of passed. Finances kind of fluctuated. We had some issues around here, and Ethyl got put on the back burner for a while. And then 2012, 2013, I started having, I don't know if you'd call it an epiphany, but I was inspired. Thought crossed my mind that if a fellow wanted to, he could put anything he wanted to frame-wise underneath these trucks. Common four-wheel drive swaps on these, especially on the GM. The short wheelbase likes the Blazer frame. The K-Series trucks, that's a common swap. On these trucks, if you use the original frame, it really wasn't that big a deal to go ahead and swap in a four-wheel drive front axle and your four-wheel drive drivetrain, engine and transmission, or go divorce mount transfer case, either way. And you could go ahead and put it on leaf springs and you'd have yourself a four-wheel drive Task Force era truck. In my case, I want something, like I said, that I can enjoy driving. I plan on driving Ethyl cross country. Kim and I plan on road tripping with this truck, and we're going to enjoy it every chance we get. So the thought crossed my mind that maybe a coil spring front suspension would be pretty handy. I've had XJ Jeep Cherokees, I had a ZJ Jeep Cherokee. In fact, I had a 5-speed ZJ Jeep Cherokee that we got new from the dealership in Colorado Springs back in the day. I remember how the coil springs rode, and they rode pretty nice. I said, well, hell, you know, Dodge Ram 1500, the second series, second generation Dodge Ram trucks, they had a coil spring front suspension and a solid front axle. That could work. And so I found one parked in a parking lot one afternoon, just a random truck, and me out there with a tape measure, and I'm measuring the rear of the frame to figure out if it'll fit, see how it compared to Ethyl's factory frame. And I checked the wheelbase, and okay, well, I figured out that I needed at minimum, a long bed single cab. You know, I could have gone ahead and gone with the short box extended cab. Either one would have been long enough, but I just definitely could not use a short bed regular cab, because then I would have issues. I'd have to go ahead and add metal in the middle, and that just wouldn't work. But in this case, I found a donor truck a couple miles south down in Texas that the seller had blown up the motor, and he wanted $400 for the entire truck. And I figured, well, the engine's no good. He said he overheated it, and I figured, well, worst case, it's just absolutely no good. But $400 for the entire truck, engine, transmission, all of it. It was a 94 model. I didn't know a whole lot about EFI at this point, so, oh yeah, 94, no problem. It's fuel injected, it's simple, I'll go that route. And I didn't know the difference between OBD1 and OBD2, there we go. But, you know, $400 is $400. I had a XJ Jeep Cherokee that I picked up for $400 that was rusted out. But it ran and drove, so I figured I'd take the inline 6 out of that and use that for Ethyl, because back in the day, Ethyl would have come with an inline 6. You know, 4-liter Jeep engines are hard to kill. I had a good engine, I had a good transmission, I had a good transfer case. It was a driver's side drop, so I could go ahead and work with the Dodge front axle. And I was going to go that route. And so we dragged the parts truck home. And Kim says, well, hey, you know, that Dodge that you just picked up, that's got a V8 in it, doesn't it? I was, oh, well, yeah, sure, it's got a 5.9 Magnum V8, 360. Why? Well, you'd be a lot happier with a V8 than you would be with that 6-cylinder. You should just go ahead and do that. That'd be a whole lot easier. You know, I love my wife. She knows me. And she knows I would really be happier with the V8. Okay, Ethyl, I was kind of thinking, well, hey, you know, that inline 6 gets halfway decent gas mileage. But in reality, Ethyl's not built for gas mileage. She's a work truck. She's a working girl. Who cares what kind of gas mileage she gets? Let's go with the V8. And so I went ahead and I started disassembling. Well, first off, I went ahead and I parted out the little XJ, and I sold it off a piece at a time. Made more money than I gave for it, so that wasn't too bad. I think I made I paid $400 for it, and I made $1,200 out of it, so $800 to the good. And when I went ahead and disassembled the parts truck, I tore down the motor, and I realized that thing had been sitting parked for a while with It'd been sitting for a while with water in the cylinders. 2 cylinders were scaled up, and 5.9 Magnums are cheap, at least around here. You can go ahead and find a decent pull-out motor for $300 to $400, and so that's what I did. I said I started this project in 2013 in earnest, and I got the parts truck in 2014, if I remember right, and maybe I got it wrong, 13 or 14, either way. But when I went ahead and tore into that motor, not only were 2-cylinder bores pretty well trashed, but the camshaft was trashed. And the cam alone, because it's a roller, you have to buy cam and lifters for this, so you're into it for almost $600 or so, give or take. And that being the case, I said, well, you know, I can go ahead and get a donor motor for $400. And I did. I found one up in Tulsa, 90,000 miles, pulled out of a wreck, and guaranteed good. Okay, fine. So I brought that home, and I made it work. And I know you purists out there are cringing right now. Oh my gosh, there's a Dodge engine in that Chevrolet. Why didn't you put a Chevrolet engine in there? Well, folks, you know, I'm not a rich man. I work with what I've got. Like I said, I bought a $400 Jeep and parted it out to put $800 in my pocket. $400 of that went to the Dodge motor. Yeah, I've got the 350 that I built. I can put it back over on a carburetor and that'd be fine. A lot of these trucks run small block Chevy, and there's nothing wrong with that. But again, I wanted different. I didn't put the Dodge motor in here to be different. I put the Dodge motor in here because I had the engine, I had the transmission, I had the transfer case, and I had both drive shafts. If I was to go ahead and put a Chevrolet motor in, I'd have to go ahead and source a transmission. Ideally 4L60 or 700 R4, which would have to have had the driver's side drop transfer case, manual transfer case, not an electronic. And they're out there, but again, that's money I didn't have. That's money I didn't have to spend on this. So either I went with the Dodge running gear, and it wouldn't have been that hard to build the drive shafts, that's easy, but I already had all the Dodge parts. And so to me, it made sense to go ahead and go this route. Work with what you got. And, you know, finances being finances, that's exactly what I did. So the 5.9 Magnum went in, and before I did that, I said, well, you know, I could probably go ahead and get a better camshaft, one that'll go ahead and tow a little bit better, because Ethyl's a working girl. And so I found one that was just on the edge of being quote-unquote computer friendly. It's a 264 HR, it's a comp cams, I think it's 114 LSA, if I remember right. I mean, it's not super radical. It doesn't have a lot of chop to it, but it's a nice pulling cam. When you get out there and you get on Ethyl and she hits mid-range, oh my gosh, does she go. And she wants to pull, she wants to work. And that's it in a nutshell. I went ahead and I set Ethyl up to go ahead and pull. The wood bed floor was rotted out when I bought her. And since I don't have a garage or a shop to park her in, it didn't really make sense to put a wood floor in. So I went with a plate steel floor and a gooseneck hitch. Because again, Ethyl's a working girl.